When you talk about eminent domain, there are really two pillars, so to speak, in what the condemning authority has to show in order to use that power. The first is public use, and the second is necessity, and they really go hand in hand. It has to be necessary for a public use. So I'm going to talk about public use first. We have a couple relevant legal authorities on this issue. First is Revised Code 163.021A, which requires the taking has to be necessary for a public use. And then the Norwood v. Horney case from 2006 was a landmark decision in Ohio that addressed public use issue, and it came out of the in the wake of the Kelo versus New Concord, or the Kelo decision from Connecticut, which I'm going to talk about shortly. But it stands for the same proposition on a macro level, that a taking has to be for a public use and not solely a private use. And that issue is the subject of this next slide. Under the Ohio constitutional provision, it has to be a primarily public, not a primarily private interest that's being served. That is not to say that if there is a private interest that is also served by an improvement, that it is somehow deprived of its character as a public use or public project. And there is a presumption in favor of a public use if the specific exercise of the power has been authorized by the General Assembly. This slide's really just more of the same. I mentioned the Kelo decision, New London, Connecticut. I was struggling for the name of the town. Kelo versus New London, Connecticut was a 2005 decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, which was very well publicized and covered in the media. In that case, it was the basic facts were a city exercised the power of eminent domain for purposes of economic development only, citing creation of jobs and increased tax revenue as the public benefit. And the U.S. Supreme Court said that's enough to satisfy the standard under the Takings Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And the response to Kelo was visceral and immediate. There were a lot of cartoons in the newspapers and whatnot, including this one with the Supreme Court justices ripping the heart out of the Constitution. Here's one I like with the steamroller with a local government right up there next to the developer who's driving the steamroller going over somebody's private property rights. The caption, if you can't read it, says, "Rest assured, your property will be used for projects vital to the public interest, especially the public interested in a new mini mall." So like I said, the Norwood v. Horney case was Ohio's response to that. And what the Ohio Supreme Court did was interpret the Ohio Constitution more narrowly than the federal Constitution to indicate that you had to have more than simply an economic benefit in order to satisfy that public use requirement. And not to be left out of the fun, the Ohio General Assembly subsequently passed Revised Code 163.01H1, which essentially says the same thing.